Okay, Senator, whenever you're ready.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for signing on. We're in the middle of votes, as we often are at midday, but I just want to raise a couple of issues and then glad to tackle your questions. First is I introduced a bill earlier this week with Congressman Eugene Vindman called the Digital Skills for Today's Workforce Act, which is a bill that we hope to get included in the reauthorization of the WIOA bill, the nation's primary workforce bill that we reauthorize every few years. WIOA funding can be used in a lot of ways, but WIOA funding is not currently eligible for use in what we call digital skills training courses, things like helping people do spreadsheets, emails, all kinds of other things that you need to succeed in virtually any job in the country today, and that they will increasingly be skills that are necessary in the future. And often people who are have struggled to find meaningful work or are in lower income communities are really at a deficit in these skills. And so this Digital Skills Act would allow WIOA funds to be used for digital skills programs and would also establish some competitive grants for those who are developing innovative ways to train the workforce of today and tomorrow in digital skills. Very excited to put that bill in. Congressman Vindman is leading on the House side. And again, our hope is likely not this calendar year, but next year, when we do the WIOA reauthorization, we introduce this bill now, and then we will try to include it as part of that WIOA reauthorization package. Second, introduced a bill, I believe, yesterday or today with Michael Bennett, and it's the reintroduction of a bill called Medicare X. And it is our proposal to establish a public nonprofit health insurance product that Americans could purchase on the exchange, adding competition, adding choice, and adding affordability for people who really struggle to find affordable health insurance. The idea would be we would direct the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, CMS, to devise an insurance policy that would cover the Obamacare essential health benefits, and then to charge a premium for that policy that would cover the costs of medical care for those who purchase that policy. The idea is that it would be cost neutral. But because CMS already exists in every zip code in the country, doesn't have to pay fancy salaries to executives, doesn't have to return a profit to shareholders, doesn't have to advertise on TV or send out marketing materials to scoop some other insurance company. We believe that a Medicare X premium would be very affordable, a very affordable option, and people could purchase it on the exchange. And however we land on the premium subsidy question, and we're working on that now, you would also be able to use a premium subsidy if you qualify it to bring down the Medicare X premium even more. So we think it's kind of a next step forward that needs to happen to give people more choice and more affordability. And Michael and I give him a lot of credit. We've worked very carefully on this the last few years, and he's done a really good job. And I've appreciated being able to partner with him on this. We're excited about it as an opportunity. We think it especially would create some huge opportunities for self-employed and small business folks who currently have a difficult time accessing health insurance because of the size of their operations are too small. And finally, together with Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Senator Chuck Schumer, and Adam Schiff, I've introduced for the second time a war powers resolution clarifying we shouldn't be at war with Venezuela without a vote of Congress. If the president thinks we should do a land invasion of Venezuela, or if my Republican colleagues think we should do one, then they should bring an authorization for that military force so that we can debate it in view of the American public. We've got Virginians who are connected to the carrier strike group that are now in the AOR in the region, amassing assets around Venezuela. The president at the cabinet meeting 2 days ago said the land invasion would start soon. Let me be clear: there is no legal rationale or justification for an invasion of Venezuela without congressional approval. The Constitution is very clear on this. Congress declares war, and then the administration executes on the war once declared. But there is only a limited ability for a president to initiate war without Congress. Now, this president seems not to care about the Constitution. The strikes of boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific, in my view, are illegal. And they are now also being carried out in ways where the illegality is being compounded. The news that broke this week that Um, Two survivors of the first strike on September 2 were massacred in the water as they clung to, shipwreckage. That is a direct violation of international laws of war, and more to the point, it's a direct violation of the Department of Defense's own war manual. And so this whole military endeavor in the Caribbean and the Pacific and potentially against Venezuela lacks a legal basis and is actually being implemented in ways that is causing additional legal problems, including potential serious liability for troops who are carrying out illegal orders. President Trump doesn't like the fact that some of my colleagues who've served in the military put on the record the notion that folks shouldn't follow illegal orders. This is not a theoretical question. The Wall Street Journal broke the news last night that the head of Southcom, a very decorated, long-serving three-star admiral, Admiral Halsey, was forced to retire prematurely by Secretary Hegseth because of issues that he raised and concerns that he raised about the legality of these strikes killing civilians on the high seas. And so before we kill more civilians or invade another country in a region of the world that has seen a lot of U.S. invasions over its history, often to the detriment of relationships between nations in the Americas, before we double down on a strategy that I think is a dangerous strategy, that I think is a failed strategy, and that I believe to be an illegal strategy, let's at least debate it in Congress. And if we have that debate and a majority of the houses believe that a war is necessary, well, I'll be disappointed because I don't think forever wars in the Americas are a good idea. But at least we will have had the debate. And I've been on the losing side of a vote, and I've been on the losing side of votes before. That's one thing. But we should not allow this president or any president to take the nation to war without a debate and vote of Congress. That's what the Constitution commands, and that commandment is in there for a reason. And we ought to follow the Constitution. We take an oath to do so. With that, I'm glad to open it up and take your questions.
First, we'll go to Tom from WTTG.
Senator, this is Tom Fitzgerald from Fox 5. Thank you for talking to us this morning.
You bet, Tom.
Senator, I have to ask you about some news this morning. There are reports that the FBI has finally made an arrest in the DNC and RNC pipe bomber case from January 6, 2021. There are also some reports that this individual may be from Virginia. I would like to ask you, number one, your reaction to this news. And if this individual is one of the insurrectionists who were arrested and charged and then pardoned, how would this complicate this case moving forward?
Well, Tom, boy, the second question you asked me is not one I contemplated. My first reaction when I heard the news a little bit ago was I'm glad the FBI finally made that arrest. That was a very troubling instance. As you recall, the vice president was there at the DNC headquarters. The Speaker Pelosi, passed by the site where the bomb had been planted in her motorcade. Thank God no one was injured in these instances, but it could have been very serious. And the fact that there hadn't been an arrest made for 5 years on this was puzzling to many. So all I know is that an arrest has been made, and I've seen the name of an individual, purportedly a 30-year-old from the Woodbridge area, but I know nothing more about it. And I don't know whether this was somebody who would have been arrested and then pardoned. And I'd have to go back and read the president's outrageous and unconscionable pardon order. The January 6th rioters and attackers should never have been pardoned, and no reasonably minded president would have ever done so. But I just don't know whether this individual would be covered by such a pardon. What was he arrested? Was he convicted of some other offense? Would that pardon cover this as well? I just don't know the answer to that. But I am glad that law enforcement finally has made an arrest in this case.
Next, we'll go to Brianna from WBEC.
Hey, Brianna.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks.
Good. So my question has to do with ACA tax credits. So can you just talk a little bit about the upcoming vote next week? And as a follow-up to that, I know Rep. Kiggins in Virginia Beach was a part of a bipartisan group that announced a proposal today to extend those ACA tax credits and then kind of a plan from there for reform.
Yes, we're going to have a vote next week on a Democratic proposal to extend the credits for 3 years. And then I'm on the health committee in the Senate, the HELP committee, Health, Education, Labor, Pension. And we had a really good hearing yesterday on affordability where all the members, including Republicans, were saying we do have to do something very soon to extend the credits, but then there's longer term issues about health affordability that we have to tackle as well. I'm unaware of the proposal that Representative Kiggins, has put on the table. I mean, I pointed out to my colleagues yesterday, we really missed an opportunity when Republicans passed the reconciliation bill at the end of June. They granted and extended tax cuts to the wealthiest 1% of Americans to the cost of $1 trillion, but they refused to extend the ACA tax credits, helping 25 plus million Americans. And at a third of the cost of the tax cuts to the 1%, they could have done a full extension of the ACA enhanced tax credits for 10 years for $350 billion. And so that was a huge missed opportunity to do $1 trillion giveaway to the wealthiest who don't need it, while allowing support for everyday people's healthcare costs to phase down. I am glad that folks who voted for that bill, some folks who voted for that bill, like Representative Kiggins, are now seeing, wow, we got to fix this problem, because what Virginians are seeing is this incredible spike in their premiums. And anybody who wants to fix it, I'm glad to work with them. But the vote in the Senate will be on a 3-year straight extension that will help people manage their healthcare costs, but will also enable us to find time to look for bigger reforms that we can hopefully reach in a bipartisan way.
Next, we'll go to Coulter from WTKR.
Hey, Senator, you kind of answered my first part of my question there in your opening remarks, so I'll reframe my question a little bit. What is your reaction to the newly released Inspector General report regarding Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's actions earlier this year with the Signal Gate situation and then the ongoing attacks in the Caribbean? And then secondly, what would be your message to the families of the thousands of Norfolk-based sailors who are watching all of this unfold, knowing their sailors could very soon be involved in, attacks in Venezuela?
Well, here's my message to Virginia families. I'm going to do everything I can to stop the U.S. from waging war in or against Venezuela. I think it would be a catastrophic mistake for us to do this. Are there problems with Venezuelan immigration? Yes. Are there problems with human rights in Venezuela? Yes. Are there problems with drug trade out of Venezuela? Yes. But we should be interdicting drugs and we should be sanctioning violations of human rights. We should not be waging war. And so the war has consequences. I mean, we waged a war against Grenada, which was a small island in the 1980s in the Caribbean. The island only had a population of about 115,000 at the time. And we lost U.S. service members in that war. U.S. troops were killed. U.S. troops were injured. The U.S. mistakenly struck a mental hospital and killed mental patients who were not combatants. There are consequences to this. Venezuela is no Grenada. It's a nation of 30 plus million people. They have high-end sophisticated weaponry that they purchased from some of our adversaries, Iran and China, and Russia. And the notion that we should be invading Venezuela is just catastrophically wrong, in my view. And I say this as somebody who's lived in Latin America. I'm the lead Democrat on the Americas subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The Venezuela challenge is not an easy one, but war is not going to make it better. It's going to make it worse. So that's my message to Virginians. And then with respect to the IG report about Secretary Hegseth, it's outrageous. Now, most of what has come out in the report was pretty well known. It was already known that Pete Hegseth got highly classified, sensitive information about military operations that were to begin in a few hours, and then shared it with people, including folks not in the military, from his personal cell phone, using a commercial platform that is easily hacked, using a personal cell phone that could easily be hacked. All that was known. The one thing that was not known that I find surprising and really somewhat outrageous about the report that I read, and this is an unclassified bit of knowledge that I'm sharing with you, is the Inspector General's report was ordered as a result of the Senate Armed Service Committee leadership, Chairman Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, and Ranking Member Jack Reed, Democrat of Rhode Island. They said after the Signal Gate story broke in the Atlantic, we need an IG report. So the IG began this investigation. Secretary Hegseth refused to be interviewed by the Inspector General. I view that as near insubordination, refusing to be interviewed by the Inspector General. I see nothing in that report. He did submit a statement, but I see nothing in that report where he's accepting responsibility for making a grievous error, an error that the IG said exposed the mission and the lives of American troops to grave risk. So it's just par for the course. There's been mistake after mistake after mistake, including this most recent news about the strike, the slaughter of combatants after a shipwreck on the high seas. And all you get is bluster and bravado and preening and calling yourself the Secretary of War. You get no leadership. You get no expression of accountability. It appears now that Secretary Hegseth is trying to deflect responsibility for the strike against the wounded combatants and push it off on his Special Operations Command leader, Admiral Bradley. That's not what a leader does.
Next, we'll go to Juliana from Telemundo.
Hola, senador, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Juliana. ¿Qué hay?
Tengo dos preguntas, senador. La primera es, sabemos que el almirante estaba ya rindiendo cuentas esta mañana, usted no estaba en ese briefing, pero sus colegas sí, miembros del comité. Basado en lo que usted sabe y lo que ha escuchado del resto de los miembros, ¿fue o no fue ilegal la acción que tomó el gobierno? Esa es la primera pregunta. Y la segunda, como bien usted lo acaba de decir, el secretario y el presidente, pues básicamente están responsabilizando al almirante sobre esa decisión. De llegar a ser algo ilegal, ¿tiene Pete Hegseth menos responsabilidad en el tema siendo él el líder del Pentágono?
No he hablado todavía con mis colegas que están en reuniones hoy con Admiral Bradley. Senator Warner, porque de su posición en la Comité de Inteligencia, va a tener una entrevista con Admiral Bradley en la tarde hoy y yo voy a hablar con él después. Pero yo he tomado la posición desde septiembre que las acciones en el Mar Pacífico y Mar Caribe son ilegales porque no había un voto en Congreso para una guerra, para acciones militares. Necesitamos un voto en Congreso. Entonces, toda esta guerra en mares internacionales o contra Venezuela, falta autorización legal, pero especialmente las acciones contra las dos personas que estaban sufriendo en el mar después del ataque primero, es un acto ilegal. Y especialmente porque las reglas del Departamento de Defensa tiene como un ejemplo de una acción ilegal. Y Admiral Bradley sabe eso y Secretario Hegseth sabe eso.
¿Y lo hace a Hegseth menos responsable el decir que la decisión la tomó el almirante y no él?
Él es responsable. Si él ofrece un orden, mata a todos, él es responsable. Y debemos entender, mucha gente está diciendo que eso fue la orden de Secretario Hegseth. Yo quiero cobrar toda la información, asegurar que es el caso. Pero si él ofreció un orden a matar a todos, él es responsable y las acciones de otros no son no ofrece él un tipo de end run o no sé la palabra. Él es completamente responsable para su orden.
Next, we'll go to Ethan from Weeby.
Yep. Good afternoon, Senator. Appreciate you taking my question. You
Glad
already
to-
kind of touched on what I was going to ask originally, so I'll kind of reframe things. My question is in regard to, again, the Inspector General's report.
Yep.
Senator Warner kind of touched on it earlier, the fact that it was Virginia-based service members, specifically Hampton Roads-based pilots, that were put in danger due to Secretary Hegseth's actions. Just first, just what is kind of your reaction to that? And then how do you see the Hampton Roads military population being involved should this conflict with Venezuela escalate?
Well, look, if Hegseth was a uniformed officer or an enlisted person who shared this kind of information, he would have been drummed out of the military. I mean, this is a firing offense for somebody in the military. And the fact that President Trump has continued to allow him to maintain his position as Secretary of Defense weakens the entire endeavor of our nation's defense. And I say that as a 13-year member of the Armed Services Committee with a kid in the military representing the most military state in the nation. This is outrageous behavior. It shouldn't be tolerated, and it wouldn't be tolerated of somebody in uniform. So if we wouldn't tolerate it of somebody in uniform, we shouldn't tolerate it in the civilian leadership atop the Pentagon. And again, many of the news items that are being reported out of the IG report were essentially known, but the inability or unwillingness of Secretary Hegseth to take responsibility, his refusal to even meet with the Inspector General. I mean, here the IG is doing a report at the direction of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He was confirmed by the Senate. The Armed Services Committee voted his confirmation to the Senate floor. The committee felt strongly enough about the signal gate issue to order an IG report. If you were the Secretary of Defense, you should be cooperating with that report. He refused to be interviewed by the IG. I mean, that says it all.
Next, we'll go to Caleb from WHSV.
Good afternoon, Senator. Nice to see you again. Obviously, important discussions, important votes happening on Capitol Hill today, but switching gears just a bit, we've got a large snow and ice storm headed to Virginia. Yep. Expected to affect the vast majority of the Commonwealth. I don't need to remind you, it was almost 3 years ago now that you were stuck for over 26 hours on I-95 just trying to get back to Washington. So my question for you is, what lessons, did you take any lessons away from that? And do you take more pains now to prepare for these types of trips during the winter if, God forbid, you were to be in a situation like that again?
Well, I think the state learned a lot of lessons, and the state warning system wasn't working. So when I got on the road that day, it said, snow likely, proceed with caution. I've driven in snow my whole life, and I know how to proceed with caution. There was never a sign that said turn around and go back or roads to be closed. And so I think the state's communication system with drivers has gotten a lot better. There were a number of fixes that were made that were very, very important. And yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a survivalist in the sense of I do a lot of outdoor activity, and I can go for a long time without food or water, but I wouldn't suggest that for others. So yeah, I usually, I had a coat in the car and I had a blanket in the car, and I was able to give the blanket to somebody else who needed it because my coat was warm, and one of the other stranded motorists. But I didn't have any water in the car, and I didn't have any food in the car, and I still don't carry food in the car, but I now make sure that I have water.
All right, and our last question will be from Sulema at Telemundo.
Buenas tardes, senador. Gracias por
Buenas
su tiempo.
tardes, Sulema.
Mire, yo nada más tengo una pregunta. Con lo que sabemos de las narcolanchas y del chat de Signal, ¿usted se une a otros demócratas que están exigiendo la renuncia del secretario de Defensa, Pete Hegseth?
Pues yo voté contra el secretario Hegseth en enero de este año porque su historia, su carácter, muestró que él no va a ser un líder fuerte en este papel tan importante. Y las acciones del secretario Hegseth desde este voto en el Senado eran mostrado bien que no tiene las calificaciones ni el carácter a tener este papel tan importante.
Okay, those are everyone's questions. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day. We'll end the video shortly.
Thank you all.